these are the 7 design tips. And, you know, you could change this to 6 or to 8 or to 9. These are just 7 that I feel like are important. And I feel like these are all very doable. You don't have to have a graphic design degree to do these things. They're very manageable and doable. So the first 2 kind of relate to each other, keeping it simple and limiting text and bullet points. Like you said, Jeremy, don't use 2 images when 1 will do. That kind of connects with keeping it simple. So just really think about what's the point you want to get across, and then do that in a really simple way that really drives home your point. And then those next 2 on the list, using great visuals and making sure visuals add value, those 2 kind of relate to each other too. Using great visuals is very subjective, but I'll just show you an example of what I mean by great visuals. So if I was going to talk about, let's say I'm doing a presentation, I'm going to tell a story about going to a carnival. I could find clip art like this, or I could find clip art like this. And I think this one is a better example of a visual. It's more interesting. It's colors are vibrant, and we might be able to connect with that in a different way. Here's another one. If we're talking about gravity, you could show this one, clip art, pixelated, doesn't look good at all. Or if we're talking about gravity, we could show an interesting picture like this, of this lamb up in the air, and use that as a launching point to talk about gravity. So great visuals is a very subjective one, but I think just think about what would be interesting to your audience. And now there's a lot of good tools out there to find good visuals. And then the second piece of that relates to it is really that idea of making sure the visuals add value. Like I talked about, like make sure it's a visual that helps convey your points. Utilizing white space, I talked about that. It's really important. Make sure your items have room to breathe. Unifying the design and creating contrast are both really important as well. Unifying the design is one that is maybe on this list in some ways. It can be maybe one of the more challenging ones. I'll show you what I mean by unifying the design. So when I start to put together a presentation and I'm really thinking about the visuals, I try to be consistent with my fonts. So here's my font list. I'm going to use this font where it says titles, and I'm going to have it in a colored rectangular box. The text on the slides is just going to be text like that. And then if I have questions, I'm going to use this script font. So I'm going to limit my fonts to 2 or 3. That's it. Every slide is going to only use those 2 or 3. And then colors, I have a lot of colors here. This is normally I would probably have 3 to 5 colors. And that's all I'm going to use throughout the whole presentation. So limiting text, the number of fonts that you use, and then deciding on a color palette, those things really help unify the design. And then here's another illustration of how you could do this. So here's a poor example, and this came from a book. I think this came from the book Presentation Zen, which has been around a while. It's popular. Here's an example of where the design is not unified. And what I mean by that is we have all sorts of different types of images or visuals around this 8 ways to improve health. So we have clip art, the apple. We have kind of clip art icon-y type things, the broccoli, the hiking boot. We have an icon that's white. We have an icon that's in a circle. We have a photograph of the salad. We have a photograph of the kids. So we have photographs, icons, graphics, all different colors, all different styles. And that can be distracting for learners. And it just doesn't look as professional as if we were to unify it. So here's this same slide with a more unified design. So same thing, 8 ways to improve health, but all of these are icons inside of these squares with rounded edges, and they're white. And so we are doing the exact same thing, but we've unified design, and we've been really consistent in our visual approach. So this one is tricky because, finding those things can be hard. But The nice thing is we're going to talk a little bit about tools later. There are some really good tools to help with those type of things too. So unifying the design. And then the last one is creating contrast. So contrast is important. In contrast, we often think about contrast just simply as like colors. So here is really good contrast. Here is not good contrast. Here's another example of kind of poor contrast. So we want to have we want to have dark backgrounds and white text, or light backgrounds and dark text. But we also can create contrast with not just with dark and light, but with the different styles. So watch what happens to this slide when I add contrast. And the contrast that I'm adding here is I'm changing this the font color, the font weight, and so that adds contrast. It kind of highlights certain things, so you can almost see that this one, when I add that contrast, it makes those years stand out a little more. So there you can see when I've added the contrast how 1881, 1880, they stand out a little more. So if you have things that you really want to highlight to users, contrast can really help do that, either through colors or through styles of fonts and things like that. So there's that list. And so those are 7 things that I think are really helpful and important for remembering when you're doing visual design.